Mm, it varies depending where I am and what's going on. Daily, I'm quite fluid, I guess. Kind of working as an artist and writer, and not unless I've got a specific project, I kind of dip in and out of things. And I think whatever really calls or pulls me at a time will be my priority.
Right.
You know, it's just like a feeling or an urgency. This is important. So I've got lots of things going, but there's often one thing that feels it's got to happen. So entirely. I mean, sometimes if I have visitors, I do carve out time to be with them and do the kinds of things that they might want to do. But I think because a lot of my friends tend to be artists, it's all one and the same, really. You're constantly thinking about projects or ways of engaging them in something, or but I quite like gardening, and that's quite new for me. I've recently moved, so that's quite an important way to reflect. And walking as well. I'm in a beautiful part of the city on the edges, which looks down onto the Frome Valley, and it's only about a 2-minute walk from the house. So, and there's a river that courses the way through it. So, it's an amazing place just to meditate and spend time. So, I have to remind myself it's not, it's a priority. Even though it's restful, because I can also get exercise, for my joints, which is important at this stage in life. It's kind of a mixture of what you need for your own well-being, both mentally and physically. So it kind of incorporates us to a way of life. So the exercise, the kind of swimming, I try and incorporate it into a regular routine. At least 3 physical activities a week. And think, well, they're actually quite enjoyable. I cycle as well. That's a big one, isn't it? Money. In lots of ways, because you have to, because of the work I used to do years ago, and because, I kind of consider myself quite socially conscious, I feel I'm quite fortunate at this point in my life to be able, on the whole, to do what I want to do. I downsized quite recently, so I've got a much smaller house which needs very little maintenance currently, touch wood. So in some ways I feel like there's less of that pressure that I used to have, which is about, the children are growing up, so I kind of feel I've actually got, bits of money that I've never had before, really, to kind of save and think of places I want to go. But it's a means to an end. It's also about working out what's valuable and what's important. I realise, the things that I kind of previously used to value, they're not so important now. And even the kind of, what it is you actually need. When we had the big house, it was just full of stuff. And when I was clearing it out, some stuff I didn't even know I had, and I'd had for years. Because you've got a big house, you fill it up with stuff. So, and because I've got a much smaller property, I have to be more careful about what I'm accumulating and making sure that I'm taking things out. So in some ways, I've tried to make it reflect on my lifestyle, so I'm not actually buying things I don't need. I mean, obviously, if you've got younger children, they're at an age where they're at the different end of the spectrum where acquiring things. I've got a young son who's moved back home, and he buys about 5 pairs of trainers, and they're still in boxes, unopened, unused, and you just think, what is that? But it's a kind of where you are in your life and what you think is important. So beyond kind of food, I would say, because I've got these fabulous surroundings, I try and make it matter and more meaningful. and also try and look at how I can do more socially conscious work as well, thinking of people who are less fortunate than me. I don't know if that answers that question, but try not to overspend on things I don't need to, and think about what it is I'm doing and how I can support and give to charity. It's probably the most current one that I'm thinking about, mainly because it consumes a lot of my thinking, which is kind of linking ideas around water, because people actually talk about memories of water. Water is a metaphor for many things in terms of life, how it moves, it's constant, it's life-affirming. We need it to sustain ourselves.
Right.
If you live in places where you haven't got access to water,
or
can't even afford your water rate, so it's cut off. It's kind of looking at water and how it connects us all. So I'm actually thinking up a project linking with kind of work I do around archives anyway, and trying to think of how to engage people, which will be through songs, through stories, through poetry, through memories, and kind of trying to capture it. I haven't necessarily got the money in place for it, but I'm always looking at ways in which I can incorporate different bits into it, really. But it definitely will happen, I'll see sometime next year. And looking at the links that I have, with people abroad as well, to look at, their journeys. It's kind of looking how you bring people together with ideas. What's time actually sharing their experiences in a creative way. I suppose in a way what's actually happening here, with the sound, portraits and performance. And maybe look at a way of incorporating in that as well. So it's been quite interesting looking at subconsciously the work I've already got, which has got water links, and the old films I've looked at that I've got, and there's so much there. So it's kind of finding some way of weaving it all in and getting people to journey. I was even thinking about the Frome Valley, because it goes from the outside of Bristol right to the centre. You could have some way of linking people. I don't know whether it's some kind of message or carrying something along the way. But it's an interesting causeway, because some of it has got a weir, some of it's quite shallow, and then you always got children that imaginatively play in it. You might set up a swing hanging over the water edge to endeavour to move from one side to another. But just kind of making you reflect and think, particularly at different phases, of your life. I always like thinking back to trying to remember. I'm remembering, I'm thinking, why is this particular memory significant? Because it's been triggered by something. And we've all got that capacity to remember and have triggers. It's kind of what we do with that. It's quite an interesting way of working with people, because being allowed to remember brings you back to a particular place, really, doesn't it? And I'm often quite keen on observing how people remember, their body language and the language they choose, and whether they're smiling or whether they're sad. So